Greetings and welcome. This is the latest edition of Lansing Online News Radio here on WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're in the bowels of Lansing Community College's Abel Sykes Learning and Technology Center. I am Bonnie Buckaroo, joined by my co-host and co-publisher of Lansing Online News, Bill Castanier. Bill, I see the wind did not prevent you from getting in here.
No, but I still have my jacket on.
I can imagine. I mean, it was astounding today. I think it was ended up in one of those 45-mile-an-hour gusts on the way into the ComArts building today. And literally, I mean, I was struggling to walk.
I had trouble walking up the steps here in front of the Abel Sykes building. So did a lot of other people.
Wow.
And the temperature dropped dramatically in the last half hour.
But there's no climate change or any of those problems. Nothing to see here. Moving on.
Just serious wind, I guess.
Just serious wind. I guess we're going to have a bit of a cold snap for the next few days. A little bit colder than we've been enjoying recently. But you've already put out a couple of tomato plants out here?
Yes.
Boy, what a brave soul you are.
So I was going to ask you, are we looking at frost? Now you have to think about frost every night and cover them. But I don't know what I would have covered them with tonight because whatever it was would have blown off.
Well, that's true. That's the one good virtue of the hoop house is I can lay frost cloth over everything inside it because the hoop house itself keeps the wind out. One of the things that makes a difference, though, that's kind of amusing is that the vegetables that come out of there don't have the same texture as vegetables that are grown outdoors. The vegetables that are grown outdoors are buffeted by the winds, and that causes lignin to sort of make the stalks hardier to stand up. But they don't have to do that inside. So when you have winter greens coming out of a hoop house, for instance, lettuce and mesclun and all sorts of wonderful winter greens, they're soft and silky. And
is that good or bad?
I like it.
Do you?
Yeah.
I never thought of that.
But it's really an interesting taste, very much different than if they're grown outdoors.
That's why hoop house tomatoes are different tasting.
Well,
I mean, are different feel.
Yeah, hothouse tomatoes are often
tomatoes.
different. What happened in the old days, too, was that they used to use ethylene gas. Well, they still use ethylene gas to ripen them, so you'd see the little bubbles in the surface. But they only did that for the hothouse tomatoes. The others were picked when they were ripe. Well, that stopped long ago because we're shipping them such long distances. It's the old hard tomatoes, hard times. They're now growing them just for the looks and for the shippability and not for the taste or the flavor. So all of them are ripened with that ethylene gas.
It's like bananas are done that way also.
Yeah.
And they are shipped seriously green.
Yeah. They're very different whole industrial agriculture to get it to you days later, but then it's only then. And a lot of times what I've noticed too with things like peaches is that they go from green to rotten in about a day.
Most people I know say that.
Yeah.
The vegetables look good when you buy them and the fruit looks good, but 2 days later you're throwing it out.
Well, it is spring, though, and we're coming up on baseball season. Now, you said there's two special events competing with each other for baseball this Thursday. It's kind of too bad they're competing.
It really is, because it's a doubleheader going right against each other. One is Peter Morris, who's a local baseball historian of national import, though. He's written 5 books on baseball. He's been the Baseball Writer of the Year several times. He is giving a presentation at 7 p.m. Thursday at Capital Area District Library on the culture of baseball in America. Is baseball the national pastime, or is it passé? And Peter has thought a lot about this, done a lot of research. We've talked to him before about it. He's also going to talk about early baseball in Lansing, going back to the pre-1900s. I think he's going to talk about one baseball player in particular, Vic Sayer, who played for the Chicago Cubs, who Ring Lardner wrote a poem about in 1918. And then at Schuler's Eastwood Town Center is an author who's got quite a bit of buzz going. He's the founder of USA Today Sports Weekly. He's written several sports-related books. His name is Tim Wendell. Tim has written a book on the summer of 1968, the Detroit Tigers. It's the Tigers of 1968. And it's that, for people who don't recall or weren't around then, 68 was the year following the Detroit riots. And there's a lot of claims that was a very special team because it held the city together that year.
Yeah.
It was racially integrated. Most of the people lived in or very near Detroit. They were part of the community. And Tim told me in an interview that he said that is the last pure year of baseball for a lot of reasons. And the pitchers were incredible. There was Bob Gibson, who had the lowest earned run average ever. Denny McLain, who had the most complete games and the most games won of 31 that year. None of that's ever going to happen again because of rule changes. And structural changes in baseball. And that's what he wrote about. He wanted to put it in perspective for people who have forgotten about what baseball was like before they did things like have playoffs that lasted forever with every team in the world where a wild card, like last year, the St. Louis Cardinals, I believe, won the pennant. It couldn't happen. Only the best of the American, the best of the national played. So it's. I wish I could go to both.
Yeah.
I can't, and that's at Tim's is at Schuler's again, 7 p.m. Thursday, April 19th, same time as Peters.
Well, speaking of Detroit, both of us were talking earlier today, and we were struck by an article in the Free Press yesterday, probably one of the best examples of journalism that we've seen in the recent past. And it was an article that detailed the life of a young girl in Detroit who was taking her walk every morning, early in the morning when it's still dark out, to get to Denby High School, and the kinds of streets that she has to walk and traverse to get there, including going by 88 abandoned homes that really have the potential to have people lurking in them, unsavory things happen, making it a very dangerous neighborhood for her. I thought it was one of the most striking pieces of journalism I've seen in recent past.
Absolutely. They did an outstanding job. That's the kind that win Pulitzers.
Yeah.
It really was. And I think we were talking earlier that this has been an obvious problem for some time, but for some reason it caught the reporter's imagination and they wrote about it. And it was moving. And it's pretty scary, and there's nothing anyone can do about it right now.
That led us to a discussion about how, the idea that we need to build infrastructure, we need to build high-speed rail and all these other wonderful things and better bridges. But part of infrastructure is also tearing down those things that are becoming old, dangerous, obsolete. And this led us to a little discussion earlier today that there was once a proposal by former Governor James Blanchard to use the National Guard to remove. There are tens of thousands of abandoned homes in Detroit that are really no longer valuable on the tax rolls. They need to be. They're a not very attractive nuisance, and they need to be removed. The governor did have a plan to do that, but maybe that was part of what cost him the election.
Well, it sure did. Governor Blanchard, and I remember this very clearly because I was with the governor the day they being John Engler's campaign, ran an ad explicitly decrying that because it was racist.
I see.
That we'd use the National Guard on maneuvers in the city of Flint and then in Detroit to tear down dilapidated homes. So basically, as most people know, that John Engler beat Jim Blanchard, so that never went forward. It probably would have. And there was several other proposals on the table then that were pretty futuristic thinking that just got left behind.
We were talking there, if you looked at the counterfactual history, what would happen if Governor Blanchard had had his second term and we had therefore never had an Engler administration? And one of the things you brought up is we probably wouldn't have term limits.
Oh, I don't think so. I think we wouldn't have had that negative sort of approach to bad government by the people in office. And we constantly decried how bad government was and actually railed against the government that they were part of. It was the oddest experience that I ever went through because I worked in state government during that time. And the whole thing really changed on one day, one night, frankly.
And many people looking at what happened since term limits said that it has increased the power of the staff, but it has really decreased the ability of legislators to have long enough on the job to know what really matters and how the levers of power work. And it really has led to a sort of entrenched bureaucracy.
Right, and also lawmakers got to know each other.
True, there was more camaraderie.
There was more camaraderie even if you're on the other side of the fence. And one of the other things I remember very distinctly was the Michigan Youth Corps, which was a summer youth employment program for youth, I think 18 to 24, something like that. We had just surpassed 100,000 kids in jobs over a period of maybe 8-9 years. And that was cut immediately upon Engler's winning the election and taking office. And that program was interesting because it wasn't need-based. Anyone who applied could get a job as long as they were a youth and unemployed. Wow. And what it created was, first, a very racially diverse workforce. And the other thing it did was it created, for the first time for many of these kids, and we verified it through surveys, that teamwork was the most important thing to them because they had never experienced it in their life. Because these kids generally were not on basketball, football, track teams. They weren't cheerleaders.
They weren't the cheerleaders, yeah.
No. And for them, this was an incredible experience. Several legislators actually went through that program. I mean, they weren't legislators at the time.
Well, I was around in that era, and there was a new initiative coming that was going to put community policing in a very big way as an experimental program into Detroit, and that got canceled. I know also you said that there had been plans for a Department of Technology that was going to
Right.
bring Michigan, make it a forerunner with the sort of the technology revolution.
Right. There was a high technology task force. I was a member of that. We worked for a year coming up with some of the most amazing proposals, and some of them at the time, because the internet was not quite where it is today, were pretty astounding. Um, there would be a Department of Technology. There was incredible effort to increase high-speed bandwidth for us. I mean, that was the first time I'd ever heard that phrase, frankly.
Broadband, yeah.
Broadband. I did not know what it was, but EDS worked on this proposal with us. It basically was going to take Michigan to the next generation, and the object was to create jobs in that arena. It ended again the day that he took office. 10 years later, I'm still in state government, and my boss comes to me and asks me if I have a copy of the final report.
They wanted to look at it by then.
And we started doing things like high-speed bandwidth promotion. This cannot be. That's kind of when I knew I wanted to leave.
We lost a step, didn't we?
We lost 10 years.
Yeah.
That's hard to imagine.
I remember back in that era, Michigan was right behind California in all these innovations. I remember even reading that we had like the second greatest number of racquetball courts being built, that kind of thing. We were always on the latest trend. Obviously, when the automobile industry was making money and there was a lot of money to share, that was much easier to do. But I think that the idea of something like a Department of Technology to build that commitment to high-tech industries would have been so smart to have diversified our economy before it had to be done as a kind of crisis and we're competing with everyone else.
We would have been at least 5 years, maybe longer ahead of more ahead of other states. Every state in the country was coming to us wondering what we were doing. That was so spectacular. We're getting a lot of publicity for it. I mean, we did the first, what then would be considered now instant messaging.
Yes.
I mean, that was pretty neat. We did a real-time speech on the web, transcribed. It had never been done. It wasn't that hard to do, frankly, with University of Michigan and MSU. They were at the forefront of the backbone of building the internet, U of M and MSU.
With the intellectual firepower that we had here, with the two universities so close together and the synergy that could have created, we could have had our own mini Silicon Valley here if we had been smart. And I think that's really the lesson to be learned from some of these things, is that it does make a difference whose vision and whose leadership gets to.
Right. And I can see one governor comes in and they throw everything the other governor did.
They always do, don't they?
It's typical.
Even if they would really, philosophically want to keep embracing it.
Well, yeah, we can't say, ooh, it was good.
Oh, no. That's a perfect segue, though, to introduce our first guest, and I'm so glad that we're joined tonight by Kitty Lipsky. I met Kitty first when I went out on a drizzly, snowy, awful, which is, kind of the weather we've had here today as well. I went out to the Teamsters facility and saw Kitty out there, and she was a firebrand. She was talking about all the kinds of changes and reviving and revitalizing a sort of new workers movement. You're a member of Teamsters 580.
Yes.
And you're also part of the Lansing Workers Center. And you're looking at trying to sort of radicalize people, get them excited again about what the union movement can do. What's coming up?
Well, this coming Friday, we are having a panel discussion, basically, of building a 21st century workers movement. And I'm very excited about it. I think that it's time that we had this discussion in the Lansing area. John Babbitt at Michigan State University is going to be one of the speakers, and he's very, very good. He can look at the history and bring it to present day.
Remind us why the history matters.
Exactly. And that's one of the functions of the Lansing Workers Center, is to educate people. Let them know, workers do have power if we know how to use it. And if we realize, hey, the rights that we've been enjoying for these many years are going away.
Well, we're seeing a renewed effort now. In fact, I went down to the press conference at the Capitol where they launched the new effort to add a constitutional amendment here to the state constitution in Michigan that would enshrine collective bargaining in our state constitution. Is that one of the ideas behind what you think is necessary to sort of get the union movement revitalized?
Oh, very much so. And we also, You know, I hate to say that we're being reactionary, but that's exactly what's happening. We have been attacked so viciously by the legislature that we were reeling. We literally were reeling for a long time.
A slew of bills kept coming.
Yes, many of them. And it didn't hurt just the unions. It hurt every worker.
Yeah.
Everybody was affected. This, at least, if we can get it on the ballot and if it passes, we can guarantee collective bargaining rights in the state of Michigan. If you have a strong union, you have strong workers, whether they're a member of a union or not, because the union can help lead the way and bring back some of the things we've lost, like the workers' compensation law that was gutted this year, like the attacks we've had on workplace safety issues, the attacks on the teachers. How can you have a good school system if your teachers are not paid enough to teach well?
And have no security.
Exactly.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan.
Who would be the ideal person that you want to come to this event? What kind of people are you looking for?
We're looking at all kinds of people. We want workers, obviously, because we want to hear their ideas. We want to hear their experiences in their own workplace. We want to be able to talk about, if you're not a union member, how do you get it organized? How can you become an activist as a worker? And you don't have to join a union. We don't say you have to, but at least be aware of what your rights are. There are federal laws out there that can help protect you. Worker Center has worked with a lot of people who come to us with wage theft issues.
Oh, they're not being paid for overtime.
Or not being paid at all.
Oh.
Some of the day laborers out there.
Oh.
Or
and if they're undocumented workers, they may find it difficult to try to get help.
Exactly.
Ah.
And that's happening far more than anybody would realize.
Oh, I see.
Or people are still out there working at piecework.
Well, that's a tricky.
And that's very tricky. But
the idea behind piecework is that it has to be pegged where an average worker working at an average rate of their abilities would be able to make minimum wage. But all too often what happens is that those figures sometimes get juggled to the advantage of the person who's setting the wage, not to the advantage of the worker. And a lot of workers really don't know that they have any right to fight that, do they?
No, not at all. And there are companies out there that do pay minimum wage, but in order to get a raise, such as Peckham Industries, you have to make a quota. Well, they may increase the quota.
Oh, so you never end up qualifying.
You never really see it. It can take you a year or 18 months to even get close. And that is just not fair. It really isn't.
I think what happens and what worries me is that when we see such a shortage of jobs and so many people long-term unemployed who really have given up. I mean, the only reason that our unemployment rate is dropping is because people are stopping looking. We're not seeing a dramatic enough increase in the number of new jobs to absorb even the new workers that are coming on board, let alone the ones that are still out there looking for work. But it really bothers me that we're seeing things like, because of the fear, people I think are more willing to swallow and let the companies get away or the groups get away with whatever they can because they're afraid to speak up. How can a new workers movement provide that kind of solidarity so that others come to the support of people who feel believe it?
Well, we have to come back to the fact that as a group, we're much stronger than we are as individuals. Right now, Teamsters 580 workers at the American Red Cross are on strike.
Yes.
And as a group, as Teamsters, we've come together. We're having a pig roast for them tonight as a fundraiser. We're asking for people's help. And of course, when they went on strike, they immediately lost all their benefits. All their insurance was gone.
Oh, no.
We came together and we were able to get $300 to buy someone's insulin. Because she needed it, and of course she couldn't get it filled.
So they're off the insurance rolls?
They're off everything. They have nothing coming in.
And that's a private nonprofit too, so they don't necessarily follow under all the same rules. They've struck several times, various units of it, I believe, and I know that people have some sympathy for the Red Cross because they collect blood for accident victims, all those things. So it's kind of it's a tough one to strike.
It is, but what people don't realize with the American Red Cross is, one, they are supposed to help people. They're not supposed to hurt. But two, they make billions of dollars on their blood services. Literally billions of dollars.
It's not profit because they're a nonprofit, so it doesn't go into a category called profit. But it becomes the operating capital and the money that they use to pay what I would perceive as, for a lot of their upper echelon, fairly lavish salaries.
Oh, their CEO makes $650,000 a year.
That's lavish. That's not the kind of salary I normally
She got
think of.
benefits that went up to $1.2 million.
See, these are the kinds of things
Is that
that
national?
surprise me.
That's the national
That's the national CEO.
But still, it's the Red Cross.
Right. We think of a nonprofit as a place where you pay a penalty for working there compared to the private sector, and that you don't make as much because you're so committed to the cause.
Well, you should be working there as a service as much as anything else.
Yeah.
And considering the fact that how many of their workers are actually volunteer, and they're not paying for those services.
Right.
Now, in the blood services sector, they have to have trained personnel there. It has to be someone who knows how to draw blood, someone who knows how to drive a truck, someone who knows how to set up a blood drive. These are experienced, educated people. And yet, they're trying to cut wages, cut staffing levels. They even had a proposal that at blood drives at high schools where they're asking people, 16 and 17-year-old kids to donate blood, there would not be a nurse there anymore. No
Really?
RN.
Wow.
Right.
That seems startling.
Yes, but that's what they proposed.
I'd be happy to have, I hope that if somebody listening is part of the administration at Red Cross, we'd love to hear their side of the story, because that just seems shocking to me that they wouldn't want to have medical personnel on board, especially when you're dealing with young people.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. If as a parent I had a child who wanted to give blood, I would encourage that. But if I found out there was no medical personnel that would help if there was a problem, I would not give that consent. There's no way.
Bill, why is it? I mean, it doesn't seem to me, looking at your background in sort of PR, it doesn't seem to me that that's good PR for the Red Cross. How do they withstand these numbers? Because we see strikes there quite frequently.
Oh, absolutely. And they're in Lansing, they're on major thoroughfares. You see them I saw them twice today. They're in Saginaw and Oakland, so I toured a few times. How do they withstand it? I think there's still the overwhelming upside that people are giving blood.
And so they're still perceived as the good guys.
They're in a relatively unique position. But on the other hand, as you were saying, that they're supposed to be doing goodwill, good things, and they're not. And I know a lot of nonprofits in this city that are sort of equivalent to the Red Cross. That you'll find their CEOs and a couple people under it sometimes that have golf course memberships paid.
All sorts of perks.
They're in the country club. But see, that doesn't send a very good message. If you're running a poor people's program or a workforce development program, I know you're supposed to be mixing with business people, but come on.
Yeah.
It's a stretch for me.
Yeah, those are the kinds of things that really do make you worry. Again, I don't think you have to take a vow of poverty to be able to be the CEO of one of these nonprofits, but it just seems to me that it should be more in line with doing it as a mission or as a calling than not just as a job that is going to enrich you. In fact, Kitty, one of the organizations, one of the focuses that you have is that you are, what is your title for working with the folks at Peckham? You are the...
Well, Mike Kohoff is actually the Unite Peckham coordinator.
Oh, he's the Peckham coordinator.
Yes.
Okay.
But I've been working with him too a little bit. And our main issue is that the people working at Peckham are really not treated with any respect or dignity. They are not allowed to really fulfill their potentials, even though that's supposed to be part of Peckham's mission, is to rehabilitate or teach vocational skills to people who might not be employable elsewhere so that they can go out and get jobs.
Back when it started, if I remember properly the history of Peckham, it was mostly people who were mildly retarded, could hold a job, but it would have to be very sheltered workshop sort of circumstance.
Yes, and that is still about 10 to 15% of their workforce.
That's only 10 to 15%
Yeah.
now. What makes up the rest of the composition of the things they do?
There are a lot of foreigners who don't have English skills.
Oh, so it's an opportunity to learn English,
Yes.
gain those kinds of skills.
There are a lot of parolees.
Ah, we've made it almost impossible for anyone with a record to get a job, I fear.
Yes.
And so this becomes the sort of employer of last resort then. And you say that some judges in the area actually assign people to Peckham.
Yes, they've been told you have to get a job at Peckham because we know that they'll hire you.
So the plus is that there is an organization, a nonprofit that works with difficult to place workers, and ideally run properly and correctly, it's going to give people the skills that they might need to improve themselves. But the challenge in these kinds of things is not to exploit people along the way.
Exactly. And that's one thing that we don't want Peckham to go away. We do believe that a lot of what they do is very valuable to this community and to the clients they serve. But you have to treat people right, and you have to pay them what they're worth.
That's the challenge, isn't it?
Another thing that I've seen them do, and I'm sure it's pretty a conscious decision, is because they do a lot of defense work. They make clothing for the military, especially the elite services. They make winter clothing. They're always promoting the patriotic aspect of it to the community. So, it's another one of those organizations that kind of shell-proofs themselves against criticism. That's
Right.
what I was getting at with Red Cross. I mean, I think if I was working in public relations at those groups, that's one of the strategies I'd use.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's the whole idea behind the nonprofit is that it does something for the public good, and therefore that's the reason that they have these special benefits, tax benefits, and so forth. But the challenge again is that you have to make sure that if there's a lot of money, you're saying that it's more than 200 million a year comes into Peckham Industries.
Yeah, they just recently got a contract from the Department of Defense for $10 million over 2 years.
Wow.
Excuse me. And yet they were laying off people.
See, that seems surprising because the whole idea is to try to make sure that we're taking care of this group of people. It's a paternalistic, basically, a way to, to put a floor under people, put a safety net under people.
Yeah, but you're supposed to help them up,
not
just help them into work.
Yeah.
And what's particularly odd about these kinds of organizations is there's somewhat of a public agency because of the tax breaks they get.
Yes.
They report publicly. The reports are sometimes greatly difficult to read. But take, for example, Delta Dental, which was paying their CEOs over $1 million a year. Another nonprofit. I think they fly under the radar a little bit.
Right. There's this residual goodwill in the community that they're doing good work. I drive by what I call the Taj Mahal of teeth every day on Okemos Road, that huge facility that Delta Dental has put up. And it's, to me, that's not what nonprofits were. They've become a new entity over I'd say the last 50 years. They used to be fairly modest organizations where people didn't make that much and they focused on good works. I'm not saying that they don't do good things for the community anymore, but it's just that they've morphed into a different kind of entity, which is quasi-corporate. They seem to have a phalanx of people whose job it is to put appropriate spin on things. I mean, we all remember the days where the Red Cross got a black eye in certain natural disasters for not being too quick to give out the coffee and donuts and that kind of thing. So, I mean, they have a pretty high-powered PR team that scours the newspapers to make sure that they're cast in a good light.
Oh, yes. But in fact, in the last 10 years, the FDA has fined American Red Cross more than $10 million for blood safety issues.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I'm not hearing about this. What's wrong with our media?
Exactly. I think they're part of that same corporate entity that you're talking about, the nonprofits that fall into.
There's also, I know I'm going to get beat up for this, but there's also a cabal about every town, not just Lansing, where everybody's part of the same organizations. They socialize together. It's become not just a good old boys, but a good old girls too network now, and they all watch each other's back.
There is a sort of circulating into and out of government, and they all sort of take one step to the left and go from one organization to another. And there's a sort of professional class that staffs these.
And like you say, I saw it because I was in government for 20 some years. I saw it start in probably probably the late 80s. Before that, people that tended to work in those jobs were like Peace Corps volunteers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of mentality that brought to the job.
That's an appropriate.
That doesn't mean they weren't really good at it, but then they evolved into very professional jobs where no one asked. They always assumed you weren't making much.
Right. I think people still assume that. We come from the old school, and that's not always the case anymore.
But I think if you take a look at the Community Action Agency director here, the director of the Workforce Development, the Red Cross, Peckham, they're making around 200 grand, 150 to 200 grand.
That's real. Those
Or
are really
more.
good jobs.
They have incredible retirement benefits.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. I'd love to hear some representatives of those groups come on and defend their paychecks to us and tell us about that. Of course, we're not supposed to talk about paychecks nowadays, right? Or it's just we now have a presidential candidate who probably for the first time in our history has what, a secret Swiss trust bank account, secret Swiss bank account. Isn't that a hallmark, a first? I'm not.
That could be.
I don't remember. You think George Washington kept his money offshore, or Abe Lincoln?
No, he kept them on the land.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen on this Friday event? This is 6 o'clock at Foster Center
Right.
this Friday. And in addition to John Beck, you have other speakers coming.
Yeah, Cole Dorsey, who's an organizer with the Starbucks Workers Union, Industrial Workers of the World, and Marion Novak, who is an organizer with Teamsters Joint Council 43, and Mike Kohlhoff, who is, as I said, the United Peckham Organizing Committee with the Lansing Workers Center.
Now your group is focusing on Starbucks right now. That's interesting because so many of those jobs, that's a whole new category of jobs that didn't exist a while back.
Exactly. And it's spreading out to other different types of, entities like Jimmy John's and a lot of the other areas that these are really nationwide companies.
Right.
They really are. But they're so concentrated into a local area where you only have, 10, 15, 20 people at one spot. You don't have 20,000 in a plant like you used to.
Right. That's
so
what
that makes it so it does make it difficult, but it also makes it very interesting and exciting at the same time, especially if you can get people all on the same page. I'm reminded of the Walmart, the Making Change at Walmart campaign that's going on right now. They are really making some efforts, and they're really doing a good job with getting information out to their communities on exactly how Walmart has treated their people, and the union busting that Walmart has done for a long time.
Listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan, I think many people would be surprised to know that if you do something like wear a Teamster's jacket on your way into Walmart, you may be stopped by their security guards and told to leave private property, and they don't want any identification of union membership. They're pretty hardcore about making sure I think they're absolutely terrified at the idea that their workers would become unionized.
Exactly. And frankly, it would only be good for the communities that they are purporting to serve.
One of the things that business has forgotten, I believe, we're sort of back to the Gilded Age, the 1920s in my mind, is that you need to have workers who have enough money to buy the products that are up for sale. Part of the reason that the economy slumps is when workers are busy, even nowadays, putting food on a credit card. It once was that you couldn't put food on a credit card because the idea was you shouldn't have to go into debt for food. You'd better not, because then you're in real kind of economic trouble.
Well, it's the same issue
people are just struggling.
When we were talking about the Holt custodians, Holt Public Schools custodians, most likely are going to get outsourced to a company from Grand Rapids.
It's probably the one that's doing DeWitt, right?
Possibly. I'm not sure exactly which one it is. But when you think about it, they've got about 40 people on that custodial staff in Holt. I mean, and you replace that with 40 people who are making half their wage. What is that going to do to the businesses in Holt?
Right.
We don't see the downward spiral we set ourselves up for.
I know. It's just forgetting that people have to have a living wage in order to be able to make it in the culture. I've seen talks about this. I mean, we're looking at how many people who work at Walmart are still eligible and collecting on food stamps. It's this idea that the corporations are able to externalize their costs. We pick up the tab for their health care. We pick up the cost for their food stamps. We take care of them because they're not making the benefits from the corporations. And so we're really subsidizing those corporations to keep their hands on those profits.
Exactly, and it's their tax dollars that are doing it. And unfortunately, with the city, like in the city of Lansing, there are at least 2 full-time city of Lansing employees that I know of. Families are on food stamps.
Oh no, that's sad. That's sad. What kind of jobs do they hold in the city?
They're UAW members.
Oh, interesting. Well, Kitty, that is frustrating situation. What are you going to be doing on Friday night? It's a panel discussion, and what do you hope
we
will
really
come
want
out
to
of
get
that?
we really want to get a dialogue going and get some ideas going back and forth on one, how to organize, two, what actions we can realistically take to get more people involved, and also a little bit about the history. The history is important because we have to realize that there are people who died, who literally died for these workers' rights. And it's obscene to me that they're being taken away by the stroke of a pen.
One of the questions I have is that we're really in danger now of the union movement being defunded in a sense, because it's going to be so hard with the laws that focus on making sure that no deductions are being taken out of people's paychecks. And that's going to really put a crimp in the budgets of the unions at the time where I think their need is greatest right now to be able to speak out and do things and mobilize. Where are they going to get the resources? Is it just going to, I mean, it's going to have to be done by, go back to the old days of sweat equity, I guess, in order to get people out on protest lines?
So the business agents have to go out and physically collect it, or, convince people to do a monthly deduction from their bank account. Again, the unions admittedly have not done a good job with their PR.
Right.
They really haven't. And it's sad in a lot of ways because we do far more good than have ever been noticed or even acknowledged by our own members.
I'm old, and when I was a kid, 35% of the workers in this country were unionized. I mean, that is just extraordinary, the loss of union membership that we've seen over the past decades. It's not what's been happening in Europe, and Europe seems to have a sort of stronger mobilization in terms of the unions, but boy, they haven't been able to fight back against some of the dramatic changes they've been seeing over there as well. It's a tough year, isn't it?
It is a very tough year. The economy is recovering, but it's too slow, and we've got to do something to get it moving faster. They talk about, a lot of people talk about those small businesses, but if you don't have people in your community who can buy your services, what happens?
I know. In fact, Bill, you were looking at a statistic the other day that small businesses really, they're not going to, if they get a tax break, put on more workers. Most of them are lawyers, doctors, the kinds of people who don't say, well, gee, I got a tax break, I guess I'll hire 3 more receptionists. That's not the way it works.
Most are going to take 3 more trips. I mean, first, it isn't enough money. I mean, it's a lot, but probably not enough to pay, the $60,000 you need to hire somebody if you're a 3-person law firm.
Yeah.
So it basically is a reward in your own pocket.
Jobs are the big issue in this culture, and when we look back, it was the unions that really were willing to put their lives on the line, literally, to make sure that if you got a job, at least you were able to make a decent living wage when you did so. That's the challenge. We've switched from a manufacturing economy to a service economy, and that's been part of the struggle as well. The wages are just not the same. And how successful have you been? Do you have activities planned for the summer?
We will, but I'm not sure what they are yet or dates. We're trying very hard to. That's another issue is we do need more people to get involved with Lansing Workers Center.
Okay.
We had several really wonderful MSU students last year. They graduated.
They tend to do that.
Yeah, and but they went on to really good opportunities for them, and they're still progressives. They're still working for people, and which is very gratifying to see. But of course, we need new people to come in, and we do have meetings every Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. We have been having them at the Grand Cafe in Old Town. If somebody wants to stop in, please feel free to do so, and we will talk to you about anything you want to hear.
You're not at the North Star Center?
Not anymore, no.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I didn't know that you had relocated out to Old Town. That's a nice area.
Yeah.
Speaking of Old Town, however, I have to introduce our guest, Todd Haywood, who has joined us, and is your photo exhibit still, when does it close there? How many more weeks?
Well, it actually is going to close. It's actually going to close on April 28th.
Okay.
Because North Star is leaving that space at the end of the month.
Oh, that's the end of North Star in that space.
Correct.
Are they moving somewhere else, or are they?
I have not heard any.
So we don't know if there's a plan.
No.
Tell us a little bit about your photos out there.
Sure. It's photos from the last 6 years or so of various hate groups and hate events across the state of Michigan. from neo-Nazis to Terry Jones, the Koran burning pastor, to anti-gay advocates.
Westboro Church.
There is no Westboro Baptist Church.
Oh, you didn't get any photos.
I have never
I have an opportunity.
That's right. They are coming back.
For Todd, they're coming back.
Just
They're
for
coming
me.
back to get Todd if we're not careful.
That's right, because they love me.
Yes.
But it's a wide-ranging show, and it starts with sort of the more respectable racists.
Okay. Your mainstream racists.
Sort of the folks that everybody goes, he's not a racist, he's a state representative, or he's a reformed terrorist telling us about the threats of Muslims. How could he possibly be a bad person? And then builds into the more traditional images of racism, like the neo-Nazis and the white pride flags and that sort of stuff.
And the militia folk in camo.
But again, as I note, this particular militia, the Southeast Michigan volunteer militia, is not the 1990s militia. Is not the Timothy McVeigh militia. And so
or if they are, they're only that way when Todd leaves.
That's right.
Really careful.
Although I have to admit that several of them are friends of mine on Facebook, and I've yet to see anything that would raise suspicions for me. Actually, I've had more problems with Occupy people with their racist postings in the last several days than I've ever had with anybody from the militia.
Now, what did the Occupy group do that was racist?
The people involved in the Occupy group.
Oh, yeah, okay. But, I mean, what was the...
Well, today I defriended somebody because they posted something that had the big N-word across it, talking about how black people were less than us, and therefore, as a white person, he had every right to have things. I was like, and unfriend.
Unfriend, yes. And block and all of that.
You know, so...
Well, we are moving into what I was thinking of a name for our segment. We, periodically Todd and Bill and I get together and sort of rag on a wide variety of things. And I was thinking of the cranky contrarian corner or the sort of cantankerous curmudgeons. I was on a C kick there. CCC. We got 5 C's together in one. We were talking today, however, about another C, which was corporations. Everybody keeps complaining about government being ineffective, and you had a little experience of getting your drivers
getting my tags.
Your tags today. That was not fun with the government.
No. I waited in line for a half an hour to get a number, to wait in line for another half an hour. And mind you, when I got up to the first person, they said that they were checking my documents to make sure I had everything I needed to be able to wait in line to get serviced at the Secretary of State's office. And then once I got up there the second time to a new person, they needed to recheck my documents to make sure they were the right documents.
Right.
It was a little irritating. I actually posted something about it on my Facebook and noted something to Ruth Johnson, so hopefully she'll take a look at it and respond.
But this was a process that they implemented because they thought it was going to be more consumer friendly.
Yeah, they thought it was triaging.
I see.
Now, mind you, supposedly this was to make sure you have all the right documents so that you don't wait in line and then have to go back and get stuff. So what do? They give the numbers to the people who don't have the documents that they need to have to be waiting in line anyway.
And tell them to go get them already.
And tell them to go get the documents. Yeah. At which point it's like, why are you even bothering?
Right.
You just put the reel up and I'll pull my own tag off and we'll just go.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan, and you can tell we will be the cranky contrarian corner or of curmudgeonly cantankerousness. And moving into the corporate sector, Bill has had some fun recently with the corporate side
I have.
of incompetence.
With the utility company, some substance, not Florida Water and Light, I'll say.
We won't use any actual names, but we will use initials. CMS.
That could be one. And then I had to deal with a plumber who didn't screw something up, but did something they weren't supposed to. But you know what? They took that off my bill.
Oh, see,
but it should have never happened.
Yeah, you should have
kind of clumsy, and I kind of waited a while to see if they were going to take it off the bill on their own before I called. Yeah. They hadn't. And then I had to deal with a cable company with no initials.
Yes. Otherwise known as Comcast?
Yeah, the same one. What really ticked me off about them is we couldn't get certain cable services that you kind of pay for. Every time I wanted to use them, they weren't working. And it happened to be when my grandson was there.
Right. And
so he was starting to get a little bit, what's wrong? So I finally called and they said, oh, it could be our equipment. We'll come out and take a look at it. They get out there. They, in fact, replaced some equipment. Our equipment outside hadn't been upgraded since 1980. Pretty old.
That's almost as old as I am.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
amortized
See, I mean,
off the books,
so
yeah.
you know it needed upgrading.
Yeah.
So, and the guy specifically says this because this is our equipment problems. There won't be any charge for this. And then I get my online bill, and it seems to be quite high, like $60 higher. So I call, and sure enough, I've been charged for it. But what really set me off is I wanted it off, of course.
Yeah.
And the woman went through the harangue about, well, you know, and you have to pay for yourself. But I'd be willing to reduce it by one half if you sign up for a $3.99 a month insurance against this kind of thing.
So that you can buy insurance to make sure their equipment's okay.
Yeah. Their equipment's never going to be okay then if they can charge me for it. What kind of deal is that? I have to pay to have their equipment in my house. And it's not
The
any good.
telephone companies have figured that out.
Yes,
you pay
they
for
have.
linebacker service. That's what they call it.
Yep.
Does that sound nice, linebacker?
Linebacker service, right?
Sounds very butch.
Yeah, linebacker.
Yeah.
The Tebow service.
They're going to keep track of you. Yes, they'll guard your every movement.
Well, consumers offer something like that for appliances too. It's like $12 a month, and they'll come fix your. Except a friend of mine who did that when her furnace died, they came out and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, your furnace is too old, so it's not actually covered."
Oh, what I love is that they tell you that you need to buy this service contract, and that we will replace the entire unit for you if you're going to have any major problem with it. You don't really have to fiddle around with repairs if you've got a lemon, that kind of thing. And on the rare occasions when I've actually tried to trigger that with one big chain or another, the thing that you discover is that if you have an intermittent problem, you send it in. And it's not that they then say that that counts as one of your service calls when they can't find out what's wrong with it. They don't count that at all. So if you have an intermittent problem, you can send it back 50 times and it still doesn't qualify for a replacement, because if the problem doesn't happen in their hands, it doesn't count against their 4 times. It's the 4th time before you get your
And then you get worn out by that.
You do.
A laptop that I actually still have, the screen was going bad on it, which is pretty common in laptops, especially certain brands. Send it in, they send it back and say, because we had a 3-year warranty that we paid extra for, like probably almost as much as your laptop computer.
But not that much. Now. Come on.
They're expensive.
They're expensive.
But not that much. They're
like $100.
Oh no, they're more than that.
What's very unusual is that I don't see any rhyme or reason in some of the costs of service contracts. If you go to Sam's Club, their service contracts are relatively cheap. You go to a place to get a computer, and they're very expensive. I don't get it.
Now, what I admired about their new technique was the laptop was in its 2nd year. A piece of the chrome had broken off. That was their out.
They have refused.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
Sorry, you've damaged it. Therefore,
Exactly.
it's your fault, not ours.
Yep. But it was working perfect until it.
And it had nothing to do with
Oh
it.
no, it was a piece of their junky chrome. It was decorative chrome that had just broken off.
We usually call that plastic.
Yeah, it's kind of like my cell phone.
Bill is holding up his smashed screen cell phone.
It still works.
Some people, however, do expect products to last forever. Apparently.
Well, now I don't buy insurance on a laptop.
One other thing
The
we
odds of
discovered
getting it
is
are pretty slim.
if you get a defective battery that comes fairly quickly, then
Why did you remind me?
I know he was. But I see this is the cantankerous corner here, or the curmudgeon's corner.
There's a little asterisk.
Yes.
Batteries aren't included because they're not
They're disposable.
But in 3 months,
Right.
Well, if you took better care of it.
I know that you could get a job.
Thank you for calling us.
Yes.
So you'll have to calm down now, sir, or I'll have to put you on hold or hang up.
Yeah.
You know what?
Good.
I have actually been.
I've heard it a lot.
Yeah, me too.
I have been so vile to people on the other end of that phone that some of them have taken to calling me back to harass me on their own time. I had one woman who was so upset with me. She'd call me at night and just say, "You were the one who told me off today, lady."
Why, yes, I was.
They come to your
Oh
house
my
next.
God, they're going to start stalking me. I hope she's in India.
Well, maybe that is a good sign that we're starting to outsource all those call centers. They're in Mexico or India.
I know.
We don't have to worry about it
That's the only
anymore.
reason I'm safe. I hope they can't hire a local hitman for me.
I have to tell you guys, I have some bad news that I brought with me. I'm afraid none of us sitting in this room won the Pulitzer Prize this year.
Oh no, who
I
did
saw that.
though?
All corporate media.
All corporate media.
Yeah, surprise. And they chose not to issue an editorial Pulitzer.
What?
So yeah, they chose not to. So my friend Jeff Watrick, who is formerly with M Live,
Yeah.
he has decided that since that responsibility was abdicated, that he is the de facto winner, and I agree with him.
Oh, okay.
So we do have somebody in Michigan here who has de facto won a Pulitzer Prize.
Had he entered
editorial
in that
writing.
category?
No.
No. Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
They abdicated their responsibilities.
Did we find, so which kinds of publications received their honors?
The Stranger, which is a New York Times or a Seattle newspaper. I just
Alternative paper?
it's an alternative newspaper, but I think it's got ties with Gannett, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And Dan Savage is part of it. I mean,
Oh, so they're
it's
worth reading.
it's fun. I mean,
But no alternative media,
As
American?
close as it got was the Huffington Post, which of course is corporate now.
Well, 300 and some million. I
Yeah.
think that qualifies as corporate in my book.
Yeah.
Almost
So-
as much as a nonprofit.
so I almost didn't come today because I thought I'd just stay at home
Ah,
and
yeah.
sob
Oh,
because I was so hurt.
What else happened is they did not award a prize for fiction.
What?
Nope, that's unusual.
What would you have chosen?
I'm not sure. So I got to go back and think. Maybe they had the same problem I'm having. Nothing leaps.
Really?
May I nominate something
Yeah.
for Best Fiction of the Year? Everything put out by the Republican House and Senate last year as part of their agenda. It's fantastic fiction reading.
There was quite a bit of it, I must admit.
There was some great fiction.
Well, Bill, you have the list of winners there.
Well, I'm getting it. But what I wanted to tell you is a book that relates to Lansing in some ways. The biography of Malcolm X won nonfiction. Manning Marable's book.
Manning Marable's book. Okay.
Posthumously, of course. He died before it was published.
Controversial book.
Very controversial, but it's I had problems with some of it, but that's just one person having problems with some of it. I'm looking for the newspapers. Of course, you'd think they'd be right up there. How about San Francisco Gate? Is that alternative?
San Francisco Gate.
SF Gate, I think, is the San Francisco Examiner's online.
Is it? Okay.
So some online was recognized.
Yeah, 2 online or 3 online, 1, but not alternative of any kind.
Not,
They're gonna go
independent nonprofits.
I think it's been such a challenge for the media to keep up with the changes to the point that, I'm not always happy with the choices that the Online News Association makes any more than I'm happy with the Pulitzer. But I do know that there was speaking of local media, Bill, you got a mailer today from your friendly local newspaper.
That could win the Pulitzer for fiction. It's from Lansing State Journal, and basically it is a letter from the publisher, or the president and publisher, Brian Priester. He's got his picture there, so you can trust him.
Okay.
And
I can't trust that face.
basically the letter is informing that we're going to get some great new improved service because they're putting up a paywall. So
Right.
the only people that can get beyond that paywall are the people that pay for it through increase in subscription fees for the additional services, from what I can tell. I can't tell you.
You don't know for sure how much the new
It
differential
looks
is.
like
based
at
on-
least $2 a month, maybe more.
Okay.
I got to tell you, I have trouble reading the Lansing State Journal as it is because it's just the quality of the writing has gone down so badly, and unfortunately, they're not covering the local news. There are some folks at the Lansing State Journal who I think are phenomenal writers. Kathleen Levy, I think, is one of the best feature writers on staff over there. And so it kind of disappoints me. It kind of disappoints me to have to say that. But and now John Schneider retired, and who do they replace him with? Mark Mays. Could you have picked a more useless, pathetic piece of crap?
Now you may have your own problems there.
I have a lot of issues.
Apparently so.
A lot of.
And again, I'd like to make an invitation to Mark Mays to come and defend.
Come on, Mark. We'll have a conversation about it. Mark covered the murder of Bob Gross. Remember that, the sports writer?
Yes.
In the preliminary hearings. Came right out, right at the very beginning, that he was murdered because he was gay. Mark didn't report that because he was told by his editors, you can't report that.
Well, that was an editorial decision that a lot of us questioned.
Mhm.
And
That was a really clumsy way to operate, I think.
Well,
they thought, I believe, that they were doing a good thing.
well, they didn't want to upset the parents whose kids had been in the locker rooms with Bob Gross, as if somehow because Bob was gay, he was automatically fondling them with his eyes or something. But so for a year and a half, even though that information was there at the preliminary hearing, Mark did nothing to challenge his internal system, did nothing to even hint at it in his own writing. And so he misinformed the public, which is unacceptable reporting.
Well, as you know well, however, Todd, there are times where you may be forced to defer to your editors.
I've been very lucky when I defer to my editors.
Why?
There's
Find
a-
sneaky ways of getting it out of
there is a long, hard fight about it, and if I have to defer to them, we usually come to. I've never not come to an agreement as to how we're going to present it. If I don't agree with it, then I'll say then we're not going to run the story.
So you would pull the story if
Yeah.
you had the option to do so.
Yeah. Well, I would have that option. I could say, you know what?
It's in your
If-
contract?
It's part of my agreement. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I have the right to say, I'm sorry, if you're unwilling to run this with these changes and caveats that you've asked for, then I'm unwilling to provide you permission to publish it.
Well, you had an email already from a fellow subscriber, right?
Yes, I did. Who was quite upset about this, and I'm not going to give his name. Let me read it to you though, because it's kind of funny. Because I haven't got permission. Have you seen the flyer on today's mail announcing the journal's digital subscription program? Maybe the worst piece of advertising gunk I've ever read. Badly written and juvenile, plus confusing. Additionally, it says to activate your account, but the site is not yet working, which I double checked. It is not working.
So it really doesn't pay to send out a mailer and tell people to activate it and not have the
That's the
link.
one thing the publisher would do. Just kind of on fun, type in the address and see if it comes up.
The question is does the publisher actually know how to use the internet?
It's
I will now reveal I have a former family member by proxy, sort of, a young man that I was both friends with and related to for a while, who ended up being a highly placed official at one of the top 3 ad agencies in the world in terms of the annual revenue that it generated. And because he was in his early 30s at the time, and this was back in just before the turn of the millennium in 2000, because he was one of their younger rising stars, they decided to put him in charge of their new cyber account division that they soon expected would grow to their estimate was 250 million within the next 5 years is what it would grow to. And I thought, wow, he's going to turn to me, who is the super geek in the family, and we'll sit down and we'll chat about all the wonderful new things that they could do with online advertising and so forth. So I called him up and we were chatting about this, and he was basically saying to me that, well, yes, he was happy to get that promotion, be in charge of the new unit. And I said, well, let me email you a bunch of links to things that you ought to look for. And he said, well, be a little careful because, I have my secretary open my email and print it out for me. I thought to myself, they made the automatic assumption that because he was the young guy in the organization that he knew all about the media.
Thanks for playing the game.
Thanks for playing the game. And that may explain why maybe I don't know that they're in the top 3 anymore. They may have fallen.
Could be.
So yes, it's an exciting era, Bill. That's not good when the link doesn't work.
No, it isn't. Especially, it's not good if you don't come out and say how much more exactly it's going to cost me per month.
There is that transparency issue. People do want to know. They do feel maligned.
They've created a new catchphrase, evidently, which is "Give it to me local." Please,
Exactly.
Lansing State Journal, when you start reporting local, I'll believe that you're giving it to me local.
Well, there's a phrase that I noticed that Ann Romney created the other day. Remember? Did you see that one?
I'm a housewife and I worked hard.
No, it was that she thinks it's time that they should let Mitt be unzipped. There's an image I really didn't have.
Wow, that's
yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I'm just saying what she said. I was like,
This may be our last show.
Lordy.
The cranky curmudgeons and cantankerous contrarians, this may be our last meeting of the club for all we know.
well, we could always do a podcast.
Yep.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. It is an exciting era. Next Monday night, we will see if we're back, number 1. Number 2, if we are, we'll be talking about the upcoming event at the Capitol with the march with the War on Women. There's a group massing at the Capitol.
That sounds awesome.
And tomorrow you can find me down at the Capitol. The medical marijuana people are protesting at noon, and down at Rudder Park, the Occupy people at 11:30 in the morning. So I'll be running around with a video camera. Lansing Online News Radio, thank you very much for listening. Thanks to Todd Haywood and Kitty Lipsky for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.